Beloved daughters of the Great Mother, this is the sound of your own blood, remembering the rivers inside you, the salt of your tears, the pulse that ties you to every womb before yours. They are calling you back. Last time we talked about you being made for matriarchy, how individuation as the primal value of the New World Order experiment has failed. The mother wound ancestral message was about informing us of the post-chaos world we need to be prepared for, as it is a return to natural order. We are a central and vital part of this order. To fulfill this vital role, we have been working to recover ourselves
She's recovered herself
from feeling too much, too emotional, too sensitive, because we've inherited a cultural amnesia about the divine nature of our emotional attunement. The mother wound may manifest as being shamed or punished for intuitive gifts that were once honored. That's why it's a wound, particularly for us. Reclaiming the priestess within, from ancestral pain to intuitive power, is what we are discussing today. Chosen from the fire, the return of the Priestess-Prophets.
Yes, what else are they saying?
They said that I thought I could not be cured.
That's all?
That's all.
Meaning that with the witch doctor they can be cured.
Yeah?
Meaning that with the witch doctor they can be cured.
No, the cure. Yeah. Doctors, they cure people. Like doctors in hospitals.
Yeah, I know it's a full moon. It's a Saturn moon, in fact. Capricorn full moon in the Jyotish astrology, which is what we use here with the Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck. That's the evening I've been talking about, and you heard it there with the bells. We talked about that song and the frequency and the sacredness of that with the San people, the oldest people known to live on the planet, as well as maintain their matrilineal, matriarchal society. There have been patriarchal adaptations along the way in certain aspects that had always been matrilineal, but such is the New World experiment. Today, I want us to understand further what Great Mother is getting to with her message to us as mother wound empaths, and what this reclamation and this return to natural order is about. Of course, the mother is the original god, goddess, having through her own body giving life and evidencing her power to release the blood and bloodline. We have that story throughout the world, which we'll return to at another time. But today we're going to dedicate time to something that is rarely, if ever, taught. I know I've never heard of it. I've had to do a great deal of soul searching, deep, depth research to find it, but only to confirm what Great Mother has already given. And so, in the tradition of the MamiIsis, and what this is about is going to become clearer to you, I hope, as we continue with this series about our reclamation from what? And that's what we're talking about, reclaiming our original self. This is a complex topic. I know that we're old enough souls to grasp it. So let me go ahead and get going here with it. It has so many aspects. And I'm going to cover the foundational, the original root source of the wounding through the series. But before that, we need to know who we were before the wounding. What is this whole space, this wholeness, this holiness that we speak of? In the tradition of the MamiIsis cults, rooted in ancient Libya, Nubia, Kemet, and extending into Levantine and Mesopotamian spheres, we branched out from lower Mama land, basically. It's been called many things. We call it Egypt today. Kemet, Nubia, same thing. A priestesshood, this motherhood, was not an escapism when we think of it in terms of spirituality. It was simply the embodied presence of spirit. Giving life was viewed as something high holy during a time, if you can imagine, that things were not explained. People didn't sit down like we're talking right now to explain things. Everything was pretty much a prophecy of what already existed, what was already obvious in nature. And mothers obviously giving life in nature, that's godly. This spiritual wisdom that was cultivated around this um, spirituality being held through the body, through ritual labor. Labor was ritualized instead of mechanized. Communal stewardship, the responsibility for the cultivation of life. Agriculture goes way further back than 12,000 years. And the importance of seasonal attunement to the cosmos, what was obvious. Without electricity, there were not lights at night. The lights at night were the cosmos, and that was obvious, and that was studied, and the seasons that attuned to it, as well as the woman's body. Again, evidence of God. So, just generically, women were in these early times very emotionally capacious, very capable of holding complexity, which is what we're doing, and doing so without bypassing the realities of pain or the realities of being divine, of being a divine being. It was obvious and understood that we are both. They were ethically attuned, highly ethical people, living by natural justice, not hierarchy. Sensory aware, trained in rhythm, pulse, vibration, silence, boundary honoring. They didn't even serve everyone. We get these romanticized ideals of what these early societies were like. And no, everyone was not served. There was a clear delineation between who needed what, when, where, how. Um, what was served is what was sacred. Wasn't a whole lot of time for entertaining a foolishness. Because again, survival being very closely related, of course, to spirituality. And so when we talk about the MamiIsis prophetess lineage, and removing the and demystifying the mystery around it and allowing Great Mother to come through and give us the whys, the wheres, and the what fors about this lineage, the DNA strands, the destiny timelines, and all of these things that are percolating back through the stratosphere today. We want to understand when we're talking about bloodline, okay, bloodlines and their origination and what they're about. What we're talking about are zodiac cycles. We're talking about bloodline extinctions. There have been countless bloodlines that existed during that time that no longer exist. We discussed many groups of matrilineal societies last time on You Were Made for Matriarchy. If you haven't heard that, you definitely need a pretext, as with all of the subsequent lessons in this series, because bloodline is getting to this idea of soul, bloodline being the physical manifestation of form, but they're extinct bloodlines. And so we need to understand this if we're talking about a return. How are you going to return if the bloodline is extinct? This is what Great Mother has been guiding me to share. There's zodiac cycles that the soul enters. This is the matrix. Bloodlines are extinct in terms of our temporal understanding of time, in terms of their existence. Energies and frequencies never die, they come and they go. And thirdly, there is within this a cycle of bloodline survival and revival. Survival and revival. So let's just understand this and get this firmly out of the way right now. You might want to make a note of it or listen to it again. There are three things we want to understand about this bloodline and destiny timeline. It's imperative that you understand it as we move forward, because the way that our brain has been conditioned toward linear memorization and rote memory is not how this mind that we have had so much challenge operating in, because we are empaths. We no longer have to be constricted by that. Okay, so you're at home here. You're at home. So let's be sure that we're on the same page. The first thing is understanding we live all cycles and all timelines simultaneously, body and soul. That's what the soul is. It's a spirit expression. And so throughout time and space, it's eternal. The second thing we need to understand is that this experiential soul and this spiritual entity as one evolves through time, this patrilinear or patrilineal linear experience in form, various forms, infinite forms, and space, the matrilineal DNA memory. So we have a lot of data, the Akashic record, so to speak, of memory of lifetimes as this soul that is expressing itself over and over again through reincarnation, through these linear experiences that appear to us to be that when we are informed, because that's how we understand life. I was born, I was 1 year old, I was 1 year old, I was 2 years old, I was three, I was over, it's like that. But it's not like that. Okay. It's not like that because the 25-year-old you or the 55-year-old you has survived countless lifetimes as an old soul, an empath, and you're constantly reviving experiences through things that are being catalyzed in your experience now. For example, becoming aware of you have mama drama trauma, that's a catalyst for soul evolution that didn't exist the hour before that realization. So we jump into a different timeline. First thing, we experience timelines, body and soul simultaneously. Second things, we evolve through these timelines based on the experience of the soul. And the soul memory is the record, is the spiritual record of these experiences. Okay? So when I talk about MamiIsis and I talk about the Sibyls and I am unearthing all of this truth about the African origin of things, the third thing has to be understood. And that is we each carry a dominant original bloodline signature throughout cycles. The one we default to and is the same one that we return to for important evolutionary lessons. If you're an old soul, it is very likely you have been Black, you have been African, you have been of the descent of Blackness, of melanated individual at some point that has given you the depth of wisdom that we're talking about. Okay? So melanin is universal. Everyone has a degree of melanation because melanated people are the original people on the planet. Everyone's our children. So whether you present in this lifetime as a highly melanated individual or not, that's not what we're talking about. It's what your soul aligns with this lifetime at this particular time as the soul memory you're drawing from, that you're defaulting from the most important lessons you need to learn now. So if the most important lesson you need to learn has to do with a matrilineal DNA that's going to put you within the MamiIsis lineage where you need to be to clean up and prepare for post chaos in the way that you need to do it, that's what you need. We birth children all over the world, especially in establishing these spiritual, religious, and financial institutions of Europe. Okay, so and many other places, Asia Minor, Mycenae, it just goes on and on. So we want to be clear on that. We want to be clear that when we're talking about these parallel realities or versions of the future, people speak of multiple timelines as if several versions of reality exist simultaneously, with each timeline representing a different outcome based on how you think, feel, act, or awaken. You hear someone say, I shifted timelines. So that might mean I used to live in a loop of fear and scarcity, but I've raised my vibration. And now I live in a more loving, abundant version of life, something like that. And so we hear about these things. And what you want to know is the difference between a personal and a collective timeline. So that's a personal experience someone had, that in their individual life path. That's a personal timeline, including the opportunities that person had to do that, the challenges that, again, catalyzed that desire or that time and that soul evolution that it just happened. Okay. The people that attracted to that experience to support and to supplement that evolutionary shift. That's a personal timeline. Collective timelines are shared. Okay, so it's a shared reality. That's what we're talking about here. And it's a shared reality of a group or of humanity in general. Okay, whether it's society, and and now everyone is feeling that it's descending into this chaos. Okay, or it evolves into higher consciousness. So it's all in how you want to look at it. Yes, in physical form, it is this dissension into chaos. Physically, materially, that is the experience. Okay. But what Great Mother is saying, that you have a collective that is beyond your physical form within your soul group of priestess-prophets. That's why you've had this mother wound this lifetime to get your attention to catalyze an evolution, a shift into a higher consciousness. So we are still evolving. So we're not returning to something that is better than who we are now. We are better than we were then. And she wants us to understand that. So here we're talking about not the personal experience of living all cycles and timelines, body and soul as an individual. We're talking here about this collective timeline where we are evolving through time, this patrilineal linear experience, this collective consciousness, so to speak. Okay. But there's also this aspect of space, the matrilineal bloodline, the DNA memory code that we are tapping into and that we are meant to stay in alignment with as empaths. That's why it's so painful to be in the patrilineal linear world experience without this understanding. Once we have this understanding, it's much more manageable, and it just becomes something that we have to remind ourselves of to do all the time until we get it down. The third thing about the timeline is this jumping and this shifting reference, being described as spiritual or an energetic leap. It's all about changing our beliefs, changing this conditioning that has been occurring over the thousands of years of our dethronement. Okay. And so it's the habits that are being purified and detoxed that we're jumping from into a timeline where we experience greater peace, greater success, and synchronicity internally with our soul and with our soul group. And so that's what we're experiencing more emotionally than the pain that is the resistance of that energy. Okay. And so sometimes when we're triggered by these major awakenings, such as MDT, these initiations, such as MDT, trauma breakthroughs, such as living and loving detachment, that's a huge breakthrough. Um, they're energetic upgrades, and we have to earn them. They don't just come. Okay. And so people can describe these experiences like, I feel like I'm not on the same timeline anymore. We're hearing language like, after that ceremony, I jumped timelines and everything changed. I remember integrating with some folks in Peru after my ayahuasca experience. And so this kind of language is that third point. We each carry a dominant original bloodline. And this signature repeats itself throughout cycles. Not necessarily repeats itself, but it's with us. It's present. It's part of our essential vibration, our central tone. If you think of soul expression, like you think of bloodline that animates the physical body, it's that spirit that animates the soul and physical expression that we default to. Okay. And that defaulting to that is that alignment that we find through these highly spiritual experiences and these psychedelic experiences. We can get back to, we can reset. Okay, it's a reset, that default. Now, when we talk about returning to that dominant bloodline for important evolutionary lessons, you can do that at the same time as well, obviously. But many times we're doing this within a trauma informed spiritual kind of like the timelines might be used to talk about ancestral karmic or inner child timelines, again, which are very much the central theme of that type of medicine. But what you are really focusing on, again, is not just, oh, this just happened to me, but it's very intentional because you set an intent. It's healing the past self, that ego, that story that we think we are, in order to reclaim. It's letting go of that. Okay, just like the Oracle deck helps us let go of the mother we want. That mother we want supports the whole concept of our ego that we have, letting go of the mother we want to accept the one that we have. And so it's allowing us to reclaim or reintegrate a timeline fragment that we either had experienced in the past as a part of our default, or it's bumping us up to shift us in some important evolutionary lesson we need to simply evolve to as souls in order to avoid the repetition of that trauma. Okay, we usually default when we've been repeating this trauma. I've shared I've had MDT for 5 lifetimes. This is the only one I know of that I've healed it, you know. And I always like to say that I know of. What I'm sharing with you is what I know of. I'm learning new things every day, but I have to at some point share some of it. I just keep on going. But at any point, avoiding this repetition is very important to our soul growth, simply because our birthright, which we discussed in being made for matriarchy in that session last week. We have a birthright to be happy, healthy, and whole. And for no other reason that we want to learn our lessons to experience that more consciously. So we choose new timelines. We decide not to continue with the mother wound by actively engaging the linear form and our awareness of how we have misused our own inner child and our own ego and perception of that inner child's needs to maintain some fantasy that doesn't even serve our divinity. So, in spiritual terms, a timeline is a stream of experiences shaped by a vibration, consciousness, or choice that we've made. We can always change our mind, but our lives are rising and falling based on the decisions that we make. Timelines can be healed, shifted, rechosen, individually and collectively. So I hope that's what we're doing here. We're collectively choosing to heed Great Mother's message about the post chaos era to manifest more aligned realities for ourselves. Okay, our time is upon us. And so, in that clarification, we want to also be sure that we understand that where we were as mother wound empaths with this pain and going from this pain and proving our divinity through our daily practice versus, um, you know, this idea of being self protective and not having any structure or guidance to do that, but just kind of crumbling in on ourselves. We want to be sure that we're looking at what's working and what's not working. So, where we were was unaware of that choice, that we can choose what has worked since the beginning of time. And that's our divinity identity. That's the download of the deck to practice that new consciousness. Where we've been is shaking versus being a strong bridge to that natural order. So your being is a bridge. It's a bridge. And one day it won't be a strain to live in divinity and protect planetary peace. Peace for ourselves first. That's what we're doing. That's what we've been working on. And that is what will always be the priority. But one day it won't be a strain to be that bridge. It will be strong enough to live our divinity identity and protect planetary peace. That's the goal. That's the goal. Where we are now is as the spiritual persistence despite resistance phase. We're still persisting despite the resistance we're experiencing during this age of chaos and internally still. Before the age of chaos was upon us, the internal resistance was what we were focusing on. Now we're focusing on both in preparation for post chaos. And so the intensification of the stress is always what births the butterfly. So this is a metamorphosis that we're going through. We aspire to live in loving detachment. That's the strength. That's the power of peace, that loving detachment. That's accepting things as they are with love. And so, where we're going is this state of unification, this internal external unification, this alignment, the end of the internal war, so that the post chaos return era to natural order is something that we not only can handle because we've anticipated and we've prepared for it, but we perform our role. And so, what does that role look like? What could it look like to trust your emotional body again? I want you to think about that. What would that look like to fully trust your emotional body again? How can reclaiming sacred ritual support empathic healing? I realize our conditioning has also made us fear our power in these spaces. But we're talking about how can reclaiming sacred ritual support empathic healing? How could that support you? What kind of ritual? We know through using the deck that we have a section of the deck, the root chakra, the sacral, and the gut chakra, that are all about the initiation into the release process, letting go of the mother we want to accept the one we have. The heart and throat chakra suits, the integrity and the rebirth resurrection suits, are the transformation. And the emancipation and lawsuit, along with the aspire cards, major arcana, are all about the integration. How we integrate that loving detachment in our everyday lives about everything. What comes on TV, what comes on YouTube, what comes on whatever, who has whatever attitude, whatever. It's loving detachment everywhere all day. That's the lifestyle. And so that ritual, that's what a ritual is. It's separating from sleep, waking up, transforming through getting yourself together, bathroom, breakfast, all that, transforming, rearranging yourself to arise for a new day, transforming, and the integration at the end of the day, consolidating the experience. That's a ritual. Every day is a ritual. Okay. Every planetary transit is a ritual. Every time the moon moves, it's full moon right now, that full expression, illumination, will soon wane, and it will be balsamic. It will be the dark side of the moon into balsamic and new moon again. How can sacred ritual support empathic healing? Well, we, of course, have the deck, and so that is a sacred ritual. Asking Great Mother, what is it that you want me to know about living in detachment from this coworker, from this person, this individual in this relationship? Sacred ritual in group, perhaps. That's something we don't often consider as empaths. How do you need to release to stop fearing your own inner power? What is blocking the integration of your inner power? And you know what that inner power is: your gift, your talent, your unique ability. What do you need to release to stop fearing your own inner power? Okay. I had a great fear about not so much speaking. I've been speaking all of my life, but I did a lot of interviews. I did a lot of corporate historical stuff, not about me, my own experience, and the fear of doing that. It's so different. It's so unique. Nobody relates to it, blah, 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 blah. That was a fear. And so, what was that a fear of? It was a fear of not being seen, not being heard. And I have to work with that, as I share often. Okay, so we've talked about the timelines, being really clear about what that means in regard to our time space experience as souls in this dimension. Very important that we're clear about that as we move forward, because you're going to relate to this data about the journey from the sacred golden age of our original priestess prophet selves in different ways. And these are the parameters that I'm talking about, okay, when we're talking about it. Another thing we want to really clear up is the definition of chosen one. It's another thing that has a lot of general use in the public sphere. And so when we're talking about the chosen one archetype, this is someone that carries a unique mission or responsibility. So this is often related to healing, liberation, truth telling, or transformation. A chosen one possesses exceptional traits: moral courage, intuition, empathy, psychic ability, or leadership under pressure. The chosen one is often seen as undergoing some difficulty or living a lonely path, including trauma, exile, or rejection. The chosen one emerges at the end of the day as a guide, healer, or revolutionary figure, whether quietly or dramatically. This is the chosen one. And in patriarchy, since the time of matriarchy, it's been viewed as, um, in the Judaism or Christianity, as someone like Moses, chosen to lead the people out of bondage. You can talk about Neo in The Matrix, awakened to free humanity from illusion. Moana, chosen by the ocean to restore balance in that movie, that animation. But then you have indigenous prophecies too. White Buffalo, California woman. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the California matriarchal queen. This is the White Buffalo calf woman, is a chosen one in that tradition. And serpent bearers, of course, that is a central part of the MamiIsis. The ancient mothers are the serpents, which we see as the caduceus in the medical symbology, as well as the kundalini, which we work with the chakras in the deck. And so these individuals, this indigenous wisdom is about the chosen one to return wisdom or to renew cycles. Okay. So this chosen one, is it synonymous with empath is the question. And not exactly, but they do overlap in the modern spiritual trauma informed discourse, especially among emotionally sensitive and awakening women. So, yes, they do overlap for us in terms of the trait of the chosen one being hypersensitive, feeling others' feelings deeply, suffering as a result of this, and of suffering as a result of collective pain, isolation, often feeling different, misunderstood, marked as different or set apart, the wounded healer path, transmuting emotional pain into healing. This transformative kind of personal ancestral pain into service. Yes, that relates to the empath, as well as this idea of a calling, feeling drawn to help others despite overwhelm, okay, being called to fulfill a destiny or a sacred role. Yes, the chosen one for empaths can also have a spiritual depth, often this intuitive psychic or connected to unseen guided dreams, visions, ancestral contact. Okay. So, yes, it does relate to the empath, the chosen one, and those senses. Um, and we're often called chosen ones because in New Age, this trauma recovery that we're in and the spiritual communities that support it are often led by empaths, people that come from these trauma affected, intergenerationally burdened lineages, such as myself, highly intuitive and emotionally intelligent, even without formal guidance. We do not live in the golden age when we were trained and we were taught how to use our gifting by elder prophetesses who identified us in our mother's wombs as empaths. Okay, so we have to figure it out by ourselves. And that again is why we are an upgrade from the past, because we didn't have the training and training ourselves. That's another aspect of the experience of the prophetess in form. Remember that we experience, our soul has various experiences of this default bloodline. And we evolved once we've kind of capped all the zodiacal aspects of that. Okay. And then we move into another bloodline. That doesn't mean we do that in a linear way. It just means that we do that to aspect and to mirror the experiences that we're having. We were great to our children. We are born, and our children are great to us. You know, it's this mirroring that goes on. And so we have this deep inner pressure to make meaning from suffering, not just for ourselves, but for others. And our lives are marked by a series of initiatory experiences. You know, I was talking, I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a year about, grandmother's calling me to go to India, to go to these temples, but I don't know that I want to go. It was really, I didn't want to be bothered with a whole lot of people. And I've done a great deal of traveling in my life and I've loved it, but I just didn't know. But I didn't realize it was actually something that I had to do. And so we have these initiatory experiences, and it was a very initiatory to what I'm doing right now. Um, I was about to let the academy go, but it was an initiation into a deeper level of sharing. And so we're prone to use our spiritual gifts, regardless of what they are, regardless of whether we're seen, regardless of whether we're heard. This channeling, this divination, this dream walking, this energy work. It's awakened through crises. It's a way for us to manage our crises. And so, since our crises can be very deep, our self healing has to match it energetically. So, um, today, what we're trying to do is continue from the message that we were born for matriarchy into what that matriarchy is about foundationally, and addressing a lot of the issues you might have beforehand as we go into timelines, as we go into the unique and high spiritual aspects. of the MamiIsis tradition. Now, today it does still exist in West Africa in countries like Ghana, Togo, Burkina Faso, and Benin. Again, not in the ways that I'm sharing necessarily completely. And again, if you haven't already, listen to the volume one, volume two, Mami Wati books that I narrated on my Great Mother Speaks YouTube channel for more understanding. That may be helpful. A shorter, a shorter narration is the book I narrated called The Sibyls by the same author, Mama Zogbe, Vivian Hunter Hendrew. Um, okay, so what it means to be chosen from the fire post chaos and the return of the priestess-prophets is that we don't get caught up in the chosen one trap. Okay, so that's why it's important that we understand, we define our terms. Caution. Don't get caught up in this chosen one trap because some people get stuck in a distorted form of this identity, especially if it feels spiritually superior, if it feels like some type of martyrdom complex, and if it feels like an avoidance of healthy boundaries, because there's such a high spiritual um bloodline and all of this. Have the power to do all of this. Yeah, but that's a cycle we're here to break. That's not what we want to do. We want to have healthy boundaries. We want to maintain a sense of clear, universal understanding of the spirit in all beings. Okay. And allowing others to make their own decisions and their own choices and live in loving detachment in relationship to them. Honor their right, respect their right to be and do as they choose. This I have to suffer to help people, or I have to suffer for you to love me, is what needs to be detoxed. That's not what you want more of. This is not giving permission for that. So caution on the chosen one on that. A healthy chosen one knows I was chosen not to dominate or to save, but to awaken what's asleep in the collective and to remain human, grounded, and connected while doing it. That's what I'm chosen to do. I'm just aware enough to be a part of the awakening evolutionary energy. That's the energy that I emit. Okay. And so that's what we want to be aware of. And in the feminine, in cultural terms, among women first, indigenous, matriarchal traditions, the chosen one archetype, it appears as the seer, the diviner, the priestess or dreamer, a girl child or a woman marked as an ancestral wisdom in form, a form of ancestral wisdom, a unique form of ancestral wisdom. We were the libraries. And so if you wanted to know about this woman carried that spirit. If you wanted to know about the energy of the white buffalo calf, she carries that energy. That's how it's more like holding that energy and holding the visions, depending on your empathic gift, talent, and ability. It might be a vision that the people need. People perish for a lack of vision, and having a vision for the initiates of the girl children going through their own priestess rituals, having a vision for what we're growing for how we're eating, for how we're dealing with this season, you know, how we're going to call on the rain, having a vision. So it's a role passed down or revealed through dreams. And everyone recognizes that the most sensitive will have these dreams. You know, sometimes people outside of the priesthood, they would have dreams and the priestess would interpret them. Outside of the priesthood would have illnesses. That illness would be interpreted as a message for everyone because that is not health. Our birthright is health, happiness, and wholeness. So this was all important information. Part of our spiritual inheritance is the recognition of this, and we are returning to it slowly but surely, to this idea of the one who holds both wound and medicine, the witch doctor. Okay, are you a witch or are you a doctor? Well, it may be an uncomfortable truth, but we're both. We hold wounding and medicine in order to see them both clearly through the contrast, as Abraham Hicks teaches. So we need this for the tribe, for the community, for the entire earth. And in this context, as empaths who may be chosen, it's again not because of this external validation that we so often seek, but because of an inner initiation, this inner initiation that we're going through, this inner evolution that has to do with this bloodline evolution that we're doing. That's why each generation is a little bit different. It's the consciousness that's changing. It's evolving or devolving. There's extinction as well, and we're witnessing that. So these are all real things that have always existed. There's no sense in getting overly excited about it. This is the way things are, and this chaos is necessary in order to create what we are being called to return to and to restore. It's not so much about a feminine uh, revolution as a flip side of the masculine coin, but it's about the matriarch holding space for communal healing that is going to take generations. And it's going to take those of us who have the consciousness needed to co create the culture of emotional safety. That emotional safety that we're cultivating within ourselves now. This presence, this peaceful presence within ourselves, the ending of the internal war, so that this world can just be forgotten. We don't have to keep fighting and fighting a world that's dying as a mirror reflection of the world within us, which is one of these symbols, one of the things that Mami Wata holds is a mirror. Okay. And the other thing she holds often is a comb. Self care, self consideration, self love is very important. And the untangling of our minds is very important. And so there's a reason so many sensitive, intuitive women today feel out of place in this world, yet deeply responsible for its healing. And this is why. We know that we are to hold space for communal healing. That's intuitive. That's something that we've done for millennia. This whole patriarchal situation has existed a bleep on the radar screen compared to how long we've been here. And we are going to go deeper into what we did, what function we played, what role we had, and the era of the golden age. You know, what was that initial age about? You know, um, they are not lost, our mothers. They are returning. They are the chosen ones, not in the pop culture sense of superhero saviors or these spiritual elites, but as ancestral priestesses and prophets. They were males as well. And we're going to talk about them as well. And the sexuality and the sacred sexuality and the sacred marriages and what that was really, really about. Because this reemergence from this crucible of the millennia of patriarchy, where their wisdom was suppressed, their bodies were violated. They were the ones who were violated, and their lineages fragmented. These women, you, me, having returned in physical form, once held sacred stations in matriarchal cultures where feminine power, matriarchal power was not feared but revered. You were diviners, dreamers, herbalists, temple keepers, seers of the stars and the soul. You lived in service to earth, spirit, and the emotional wholeness of your people before the descent. And that took thousands of years to happen because of the power and respect we commanded around the world. It took a long time, not as quickly as this apparently is happening. You know, um, there were centuries of enslavement, colonization, witch hunts, rape, religious silencing, imprisonments, material and metaphysical forces. These lineages were shoved into the shadows, and yet their spirit didn't die. They went underground. They were hidden in the blood, our blood, the womb, the dreams, the now. And they're waking up again in you. But this is the difference. And this is what I want to leave you with today. You are chosen, okay? You are chosen from this fire of descent to return as the priestess prophet. Yes, yes, yes. You are chosen. But here's the difference: you are not returning unchanged. You are bringing lessons hard won through trauma and time. That spiritual superiority that turns sacred service into hierarchy. This time, the resistance you have to leadership is because of this. Because this time, you lead as one among, not one above. Now, that's the way we led before. But in the millennia of descent, in order to survive, we took on some of the values and behaviors of the patriarchy to survive. And some of us are cycling that through too. But because there was such a resistance even to that, there's nothing we could do but totally and utterly submit, as we are finding now, today, to be the bottom line. There's a lot of trauma around that we're healing and resisting leadership, because now we are returning this time not with this spiritual superiority that turns our sacred service into a hierarchy. This time we are leading as one among, not one above. And in order to do that, like Great Mother says, we have to be fully healed. That doesn't mean we don't prioritize our daily maintenance work. And that's why this phase and this series is all about trigger management. And we need a foundation before we move forward because there's no need for unnecessary triggering as we discuss this, as long as we understand each other. Another thing, we are returning not only without spiritual superiority and with lessons hard won through trauma and time, that's showing up also as that martyrdom complex that depletes the soul and burns the body. This time, we give only from overflow, not from empty. We give only from overflow. And so if we don't have it as much as we want to have it because we feel so deeply and we care, we take that not as pain, but as proof. The divine attention needs to be on ourselves because what? That is what's going to work in that moment. It's not going to work giving from empty. We've learned that, or we are learning that in preparation for post chaos. And finally, we are not returning unchanged because we no longer avoid healthy boundaries that create cycles of resentment, burnout, and enmeshment. This time, we are choosing fierce love with clarity, not self erasure. We've been erased. We've been erased because we had no boundaries. We thought it would never end. And we're going to continue with the golden age and more detail about how we thought and how we lived. But for now, just know that you are not the same soul, but wiser. You've come back, not just to reclaim your role, but to rebuild the world in which such roles are possible again, through community, through clarity, and culture that honors both the divine and the human. So if you have felt like your life has been a long, lonely training ground, if your suffering has felt inexplicably sacred, if you're haunted by ancient memories, modern injustice, and a desire to heal the emotional wounds of generations, this is your confirmation. You were not broken. You are initiated. You are not just empathic. You are prophetic. You are not just healing. You are returning. This is your time. Next time, we'll be going deeper into how we actually lived, what we actually thought, what we were actually doing, and how that started to fall. But in the meantime, in between time, remember, Great Mother loves you, and I do too.
What are they saying in the song? What are they saying in the song?
The song says, I thought I would not be coward. The song says that.
Is that all it says? Is that all it says?
The song,
Yes, what else are they saying?
they said that I thought I could not be coward.
That's all?
That's all.
Meaning that with the witch doctor they can be cured.
Yeah?
Meaning that with the witch doctor they can be cured.
No, the keyword. Doctors, they cure people. They are like doctors in hospitals.